And there we go. I want to say welcome to everyone to our second local authors book group. And we're very fortunate to have Chris Bieker with us. She is a member of the Inland Northwest Writers Guild, and she likes to write sort of interesting, I'll say, funny mysteries. She's pretty darn good at it too. Her first book that came out a couple years ago was Murder at Manito. And that's when I first met her strange characters. Well, they're not strange. They just have unusual names. I'll put it that way. We'll talk about that in a minute. And now Chris has out this year her second book, and it's Blood on Bloomsday. Geez, I wonder what that's like. We have a Bloomsday race in this community, but I'm going to ask you a little bit, Chris. I'm kind of curious, when did you first decide you were going to write, write it all, and particularly write these books?
Well, thanks, Linda. Murder at Manito was the first book, and it sort of sprouted organically from stories that I just made up and told to a friend to make her laugh. And it became a book after I retired and had time to write. Blood on Bloomsday was a whole different challenge because I had only intended to write the one book, but I had many readers ask for more adventures from detectives Rex Begonia and Ivy Lizzie. And so I had to start fresh with a blank slate and rise to the challenge of coming up with a new story.
Well, I know you have an interesting background in a lot of areas, kind of in love with the outdoors. And are you a hunter?
No, no, actually I'm not. And it's kind of funny because I'm a vegetarian.
Here.
But it's not for moral reasons or anything. It's just because I prefer other kinds of protein. But I do have friends and family that hunt, and I was just kind of fascinated with poaching in the area and how that could turn into a story. So the first story, Murder at Manito, did evolve from my background, gardening and agriculture. And then in Blood on Bloomsday, I branched out and brought in a hunting and poaching element to the investigations. And so there are still plant characters in Blood on Bloomsday, and but it again just took it in a little different direction.
Sure. Well, first of all, most people may or may not have read the book. Did anybody besides me read the book? Sue, I think you may have. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to try to avoid giving away the ending. Also, if this is up on YouTube, we don't want to ruin that for them either. So I'll just give a little hint to Chris and anybody else who's read it. You've got a pretty solid background you've worked with some agencies in the past, didn't you?
Yes, I worked for the U.S. Department of Agriculture. I started in forestry and then worked in natural resources and farming. Worked with farmers. And then I also have friends who work for the U.S. or worked for, and some still work for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the state Fish and Wildlife Service, as well as Department of Natural Resources. So I could pull from a wide background for the story. And I am fortunate enough to have a friend that is a retired Spokane homicide detective. So that has helped greatly too,
Sure.
because for those of you who might write murder mysteries, that old adage about write what you know, it doesn't really apply unless maybe you worked in law enforcement. So both, well, particularly Blood on Bloomsday required quite a bit of research in a number of different areas. Even though I did have some background, I needed to learn a whole lot more about hunting. I needed to learn a lot more about international smuggling of animal parts. I needed to learn more about Customs and Border Patrol, some of the agencies that I knew just a little bit about. So there was really quite a bit of research involved. And yes, it's fiction, but I also like my mysteries to be plausible. So it is humorous. So it's, you know, it's not like a police procedural type of mystery. It's definitely more on the lighthearted side of things, but I do want my books to I don't know, spark a little laughter maybe. So there is a lot of humor, and most of that comes from wordplay.
Yeah. When you talk about having to do research, I'm not surprised, because you've put just about everything but the kitchen sink in this book when it comes to the different groups. You seem to. I had a question from Sue typed in the chat, and she asked if you had done work in other parts of the country or just in the Northwest.
Just in the Northwest, although my work has taken me to other parts of the West Coast, but yes, mostly just the Northwest. And I've worked throughout our whole state, so I'm pretty familiar with the state of Washington and the natural resources within the state.
Okay.
Have you tried that Border Patrol up here on Division?
No, I haven't been there. For this particular story, I contacted their Washington, D.C. office and their office in Seattle, because I was dealing with animal parts being smuggled out of the port of Seattle.
Okay.
So I interviewed some folks with the Border Patrol in both of those, and Customs and Border Patrol in both of those areas.
Okay, because their gate is mostly closed all the time, so you probably have to call them if you ever needed to ask them anything.
And I'm going to hold your questions until we get to the discussion part of the day. So go ahead. Joan has a question waiting in the chat. So if you want to use that for now, so you don't lose your thing, go ahead. And we'll continue with our discussion as planned, and then I'll go right to those questions. I wanted to ask, well, Steve, what's happened now? I'm thrown out of the saddle. I can't think of what I wanted to ask. Oh, I know what it was. Another big one throughout the book, your story seems to have a lot of belief in interagency working. I mean, you've got what, 5 or 6 different agencies between the local, the 3 or 4 police type ones here locally, and then the ones you've caught into with the fire department and the people on the coast. I mean, you've got a strong, does that seem like the way it really is?
So yes and no, but I will address that, and I'll answer these couple of questions real quick too. My writing background is that I did work in communications. Most of my writing was more journalistic style. I did get a professional copy editor. And the animal parts smuggled in this case tend to be bear, black bear, like bile. And I won't go into that more because that is part of the story. But yes, so interagency, this is important because it's actually important to the character development of our main character, Rex Begonia. So Rex is a solitary type of person. He is most comfortable working by himself, and just surrounded by his plants and his books and a really great cup of coffee. And in the first book, he is challenged to kind of break out of that solitary shell a little bit by being assigned to being the mentor and the partner for the new recruit, INWG. And she is sort of opposite of Rex in that she is young and chatty and really has a perky personality, and which kind of grates on Rex a little bit. And so in that first book, part of his character development is just breaking out of that shell and working with other people more. And in the second book, Blood on Bloomsday, he has to take that to a whole new level and not just work with other people, but work with other agencies and other jurisdictions. And so there's a whole nother layer of complexity to that challenge for this rather solitary detective. I think one of the things that I would like to share about Blood on Bloomsday is why I call this a double Bloomsday. Because like I mentioned, there's a lot of wordplay. The double Bloomsday may not be so obvious to a lot of people. There are many things that if you read it carefully, you might find multiple meanings to names or words. But Bloomsday itself has a double meaning here. The most obvious being the lilac Bloomsday race that we have here in Spokane. And it does provide the backdrop of the story. The story takes place leading up to Bloomsday. It starts with an assault. So Rex and Ivy are investigating an assault that by the time the Bloomsday race happens, it becomes a murder mystery. And so blood is spilled on Bloomsday. The second Bloomsday, because there really is another Bloomsday that's celebrated worldwide, and it's a literary Bloomsday. So I thought readers might enjoy having a literary Bloomsday too. And that Bloomsday started, it's based on James Joyce's book, Ulysses. And he's an Irish writer who wrote about the day in the life of this one man, Leopold Bloom, and all the things that happened to Leopold Bloom on that one particular day, which happens to be June 16th. And to this day, people celebrate Bloomsday by dressing up as characters in that story and visiting sites in Dublin where Leopold Bloom had been on that day. So in Blood on Bloomsday, the latter part of the story takes place on June 16th. And it all happens on that day. And it's everything that happens to Rex on that day. And similarly to with Leopold Bloom and another story, Homer's Odysseus, where or the Odyssey, where the Greek character Odysseus went through all of these adventures and returned home to his wife, and Leopold Bloom returned home to his wife. So in this story, our character Rex has many things happen to him, including events that may prevent him from getting back to Spokane or getting back to Spokane alive. And so all that happens on June 16th. And so that's the second Bloomsday in this particular story.
Chris, Julie was asked, well, she had to leave. She couldn't wait. She was asking about marketing. I think she had to go pick her kids up, and she's a writer. So her question came about, what marketing efforts have you found to be the most effective?
Oh my gosh. Well, so that has become a challenge, because most of the first book came out in 2020 during the pandemic, and the second book in 2022, still in the pandemic. But I'm self-published, and that's a whole nother story there. But I had only intended to write the first book, and to write the first book more as a challenge as to whether I could even do it. And it really kind of took off, I think, because particularly in this area, we have a lot of fantastic gardeners and people who love plants. And that's one of the things that the book celebrates is plants and gardening, and they loved it. And so it really spread. And I think knowing the audience and who might like the type of story really helps.
Okay, that's great. I'm going to let her know that. We've got, I'm backing up here to Joan's question. You did talk about your writing background, but I'm sorry, I missed it. Did you speak to the professional edit part of it?
Yes, so I did. So those of you who are writers know there's more than one type of editor. There's the type of editor that looks at a book for substance, and then you've got copy editors and proofreaders. As a self-publisher, what I did for the substance part of the book is primarily rely on a few friends who have published books in the past, and then spent my money on the copy editing. The first go around in the first book, I was not as happy with the result as I was the second time. But I had gone through a process of identifying a number of copy editors and calling up half a dozen, interviewing them, having them send samples and everything. And I chose an editor out of New York. And I'm thinking, this is probably, and really what I should have probably done is talked more to authors here in the local area and found out who you use and who you've had success with. So for the copy editing, I did spend the money to have it edited, but I have not spent that extra money as far as having someone edit for the substantive part of the book.
How about you? Did you get all of your question answered about the exporting of illegal animals from Spokane?
Yes.
You did? Okay, good. I'm sorry, I was distracted to try to let people in and lost track here. Joan is also asking, who are your favorite mystery authors?
So I really like a lot of mystery authors. I would say probably the one who has influenced me the most is Patrick McManus, who is a local author, but he's not necessarily thought of as a mystery writer. He's thought of more for his outdoor writing. He had started writing, hunting and fishing stories. So again, I mean, it's kind of a natural fit with the topic I cover in Blood on Bloomsday. But in his later stories, he wrote these Sheriff Bo Tully mysteries that just, when I read them, it makes me laugh out loud.
Yeah.
And they are about, this sheriff from Blight, Idaho, and all these dirtbag type of criminals. And it just makes me laugh. And that's what I hope to achieve as well. And I really don't expect to be like Patrick McManus, but I want to provide readers with a mystery that challenges them to try and figure out, who done it, and hopefully at the same time create a little bit of laughter.
Well, how about you give us a little taste of this book by reading that, maybe the first chapter or so? Or did you have something else in mind?
Well, I'm going to skip ahead to the second chapter. And the reason for that is that I think the second chapter lays out the story a little bit better than the first chapter.
Mhm.
So one thing about my professional writing background, again, it was a journalism style. And so in journalism, if any of you are familiar, the idea is to get right to the point, put all the most important information right up front. And one of the challenges I found when switching over to writing fiction was, I need to provide a lot more description to help my readers. And so I did do quite a bit of revising at first as beta readers would ask, well, fill in the gaps type of questions. So anyway, I do like to start a story with a mystery story with some major thing happening. And so in the first chapter of this story, Blood on Bloomsday, we learn about the assault, which actually has taken the chief, Barney Blueblood, is the Spokane police chief, and his nephew was assaulted. And so we're going to start chapter 2, which is the next day. Let me get a quick drink.
Good idea.
So the next day, Spokane's top homicide detective arrived at the office early enough to grind his own coffee beans and make a cappuccino prior to meeting with Chief Blueblood. Rex, as usual, chose to skip the communal pot with watered down coffee and use his own espresso machine and beans. As a result, his colleagues considered him a coffee snob. Ostensibly, Rex argued that a decent cup of coffee was necessary for the brain to tackle complicated criminal cases. One of those colleagues, Sergeant Phil O'Dendron, entered the office break room. Next to Rex's partner, Ivy, and the chief, the sergeant was probably the nearest the detective had to a close friend in the department. Rex and the burly, ginger-haired cop were colleagues for almost 20 years. Despite their differences, both men worked hard and took pride in serving on the Spokane police force. O'Dendron was friendly and outgoing, and unlike Rex, he enjoyed interacting with the public. Hey, Rex, how'd you like to help make the Spokane Police Department famous? O'Dendron asked as he poured a cup of coffee from the communal pot and picked up a bear claw pastry from a plate of mostly crumbs. Famous? Famous for what? Asked Rex, wondering what scheme O'Dendron had planned. This is the year the Spokane Police Department wins the Bloomsday Corporate Cup. At least it was until Officer Silva tore a ligament in his knee during a drug bust. It looks like he may not be ready to run in Bloomsday in 3 weeks. He was our ace runner. So we need someone to take his place on the department's corporate cup team. The fire department has some new recruits. They used to run for INWG. They're boasting they'll take the cup this year. We want to show them what the boys and girls in blue can do, explained the sergeant. The Lilac Bloomsday Run was a 7.46 mile race through the heart of the city. Every first Sunday in May for 4 decades, about 50,000 runners, walkers, and wheelchair athletes proved their fitness, or not, in one of the largest timed road races in the world. Racers traveled from countries around the world to participate and vie for the prize money and fame. The Spokane firefighters team, the Heat, won the corporate cup for the past 5 years. All of Spokane turned out for the race, whether as participants, volunteers, or viewers along the race route. Rex ran every Bloomsday for 20 years and always placed in the top 150 racers. Now that he was in his 5th decade, he opted to volunteer. Besides, he owned more Bloomsday t-shirts than he knew what to do with. Rex's first inclination was to decline. He didn't want to be part of a team. I haven't run regularly for the past 4 years. I would need to get in better shape, he rationalized. Then he thought about carbo loading on pasta. Incentive enough. When do you need an answer? I'm supposed to be meeting with the chief, he said, looking at his watch. Don't think about it too long. We've got practice tomorrow at 5 a.m. Meet here in the office. We run along the Centennial Trail and loop through the park, said O'Dendron. Rex nodded to his colleague and sprinted down the hall to the chief's office. Getting ready for Bloomsday? The chief asked Rex, who caught his breath as he sat down across the desk from Barney Blueblood. At 6 feet 4 inches and with broad shoulders, Chief Blueblood cut an imposing figure. His short, dark hair, graying at the temples, framed a serious face that belied his sense of humor. Even under cross-examination, the chief was known to have a dry wit. Rex attempted to smile. Sorry to get here late, Chief. How's your nephew? Any improvement? He's stable. Thanks for asking, replied Chief Blueblood. He took quite a beating. It looked like whoever did it left him for dead. He was lucky, though. He couldn't have been there for long before a couple of casino kitchen hands out for a smoke found him behind a dumpster and called for help. A curious case of smoking saving a life, thought Rex. Wait until the tobacco lobby hears of this. The Cash Cow Casino? Isn't that out of our jurisdiction, Chief? He asked. That's in Airway Heights. Doesn't that fall under the county's jurisdiction? Or would the tribal police be handling the case because the casino is tribal property and the victim is a Spokane Indian? Jurisdictional issues can be tricky. You're right. It is tricky, said Blueblood. But my younger brother Andy is the Spokane Tribal Police Chief. Yeah, it runs in the family. He's also Scout's father. In this case, I think I can convince Andy to request assistance from the Spokane Police Department, and I'll have a talk with Sheriff Andy Wyatt to make sure we're cooperating with the county. Don't start the investigation until I've had a chance to clear it with the tribe and the county. Remember, this is personal. When Scout was in high school, he started hanging out with a bad crowd. He began doing drugs, then selling drugs. Scout and Andy had a falling out. It was quite the scandal when the tribal police chief's son was implicated in drug dealing. Scout spent a couple of years in juvenile detention, and when he was released, I brought him home with me, put him in rehab. He cleaned up, earned his GED, and got a job at Tom's taxidermy shop in the Hilliard area of town. While he spoke, Chief Blueblood haphazardly shuffled items around his desk. We bonded during his early years. When his dad and I took him hunting, Scout felt comfortable with me, and I've been mentoring him the past 10 years. He was doing well. He even started talking about going to college and studying anthropology. But recently, one of his old buddies showed up. Scout started staying out late and avoided inquiries about where he was and who he was with. I suspect the beating had something to do with his old friend and whatever they were involved with. This has to be hard for my brother. Blue Blood sighed heavily and rubbed his eyes. Despite their falling out, he loves Scout as deeply as any father loves a son. They had just started getting back on track before this happened. My brother's a professional, and as the Spokane Tribal Police Chief, he'll make every effort to investigate thoroughly, no matter where it leads him. But as a father, I'm sure he'll accept any help we offer. I know you don't like multi-jurisdictional work, but you're our best detective, Rex. I'm asking you as a friend, not as your boss, to help on this case. It was true. Rex Begonia was Spokane's top detective, homicide detective, that is. And this wasn't a murder case. He much preferred to investigate alone without the complications of working with other people, and especially with other departments. A few years ago, Chief Blood pointedly directed him to interact more within his own department, and even assigned Rex to mentor the young and diminutive junior detective Ivy Lizzie as his partner. Ivy had surprised Rex with her excellent investigative skills and physical strength while helping solve the murder at Manito case and bringing the perpetrator to justice last year. How about Ivy? Is she assigned to this case, Chief? Rex asked. Good idea. She could use the multi-jurisdictional experience. In fact, there's a multi-agency training taking place in Seattle later this month. It's being headed up by the FBI. See if there are any openings. If there are, I'd like you both to register to attend. Now, what have I done? Thought Rex. He hadn't intended to get involved with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Switching back to the case at hand, he asked, when can I speak with Scout? That's the problem. He's in a coma. The doctors don't know how long it will be until we can talk with him, answered the chief. We've got no witnesses and a contaminated crime scene. It's more complicated than investigating a homicide with a body of evidence. And that's the end of chapter 2.
Okay, that's a nice bite. That's one of the longer chapters. A lot of these things are pretty short, but that's, yeah, but it lays out an awful lot about the characters and that. I don't know if folks want to unmute themselves and dive in and start verbally asking questions or making comments or.
Well, as a teaser, I'm going to mention that I thought it was amusing that you insert yourself into the story, Chris.
That it is a funny story. And actually, I avoided chemistry class until college because in high school, there was a quiz called the Beaker Bowl in chemistry. There's a lot of fun with names, even my own.
Yeah.
Any other questions that folks have?
Well, I will ask, this is a question that I've asked on a variety of other author interview things that I've attended through other bookstores. But if you were hosting a dinner party, what 3 writers, living or dead, would you invite?
Oh my gosh. Well, I would definitely want to invite Patrick McManus. And I would probably do more than one dinner party because I would like to have a theme. Like maybe at this one, I would also have Arthur Conan Doyle. And let's see, who else would I want at that one? Maybe either Louise Penny or Tony Hillerman. And so, yeah, it would be can I have more?
You can have more.
Edgar Allan Poe. I would definitely have to have Edgar Allan Poe. So yeah, if it were like a murder mystery or a mystery themed dinner party, that's who the authors would be.
Okay.
Brenda, Herb, Janet. We got lots of people unmuted now.
So did you ever meet Pat?
I did, yes. And I also saw the plays that were done. I'm trying to remember, there was a young actor that portrayed Patrick McManus in the plays, and they were kind of a compilation of some of his outdoor stories, and again, just extremely humorous. Did you meet him as well?
Yeah, actually, I know his sister too. He went to high
Oh.
school at Sandpoint. Pat was the offensive center on the football team the same year that Jerry Kramer was on our team, and they went to state.
Ah,
Whoopee.
but I would absolutely love to meet his sister. If there were any way of getting to let her know, I would just, I so enjoyed his stories and his stories of growing up in Idaho or in this area. And then again, his Sheriff Bo Tully character was really fun.
You know exactly every place he's talking about in the Sandpoint area, the Popsicle Stick Bridge.
Yes.
And of course, you know, his sister, what was she, the troll? She actually became a
Yes.
skater.
Yes. So, and that's one of the things that I'm hoping that people can enjoy in these books too. There are some places in Spokane, in this area, where I actually use the name of the real place, like Manito Park or Riverfront Park, places that tend to be more public places.
The clock tower.
What's that?
The clock tower.
Yes,
We met there for a
exactly.
minute.
And then there are fictional places that are kind of based on some real places. And I have had readers guess where some of those fictional places might be.
Mhm.
And in fact, the final, well, so in Blood on Bloomsday, there's a final scene and then there's an epilogue. The epilogue is to kind of tie up one of the subplots. But the final scene of the story prior to the epilogue takes place in a Irish pub. Again, kind of with that Bloomsday theme and that second, literary Bloomsday theme. And so, yeah, it's based on one of our local Irish pubs.
And we all know what it
Cyrus
is.
O'Leary. Cyrus O'Leary.
There's a coffee shop that Rex hangs out at a lot. And it was based on a place that was that really existed. So yeah, that's one of the things that readers have had a lot of fun with, are the locations and the names. So somebody asked about which one would you start with? So I think it's always good to start with, it's always good to start with the first one in a series. However, because I'm one of those rogue readers that doesn't always start at the beginning, I tried to be very aware of that when writing Blood on Bloomsday, so that I could bring back some of the characters without giving away what happens in Murder at Manito. So you could easily start with Blood on Bloomsday if you wanted.
On your marketing, do you buy click ads on the big sites?
No, I haven't done that. And I guess I hadn't started out to be an author. Again, I just started out with Murder at Manito because it was a fun story that I was trying to humor a friend who just needs some humor in her life at the time. And it ended up becoming a story. And I'm retired, so I wasn't really trying to make a living at being an author. Otherwise, I think I would be trying a whole lot harder. And and I really do need to try harder, actually. So there are some things that I intend to do, because I am working on a third story with Hoop Fest as the background of this story. And Rex and Ivy are a little further along in their careers, and they've got, just as they are dealing with, external forces of murder and mayhem happening in Spokane, they are also dealing with their own personal lives. And so this, I'm thinking that it'll be a 3-story series. And there's a transition happening with Rex and Ivy in this third story. But as part of that, I do need to do more marketing. Yes. And I'm open to hearing some tips from the rest of you on that.
I was wondering if
What's that?
Yeah, I think Janet, I'm sorry, Sue.
I was
Yeah.
wondering if Hoop,
Go ahead, Sue.
I was wondering if Hoop Fest was going to be your next endeavor.
Yes.
Janet, did you have some ideas to share with Chris?
Well, I just had a question. She said she's self-published, and I just wondered who published, what companies he published with. And, as far as announcing her books, how does she do that? That's part of marketing. So those are my questions.
So when I knew that I wanted to rise to this challenge, that's Blood on Bloomsday, and this is Murder at Manito. And I wanted to say something about the covers on these books too. So these are done by a local artist, Megan Perkins, who I think does a really good job of capturing Spokane and iconic scenes in Spokane. But when I wanted to rise to the challenge of writing Murder at Manito and to see if I could actually do something with it, I first sent the first chapter to a few different writing contests, because I wanted to find out if anyone else had this weird, quirky sense of humor besides myself and the friends who I would share it with, and don't always give you the most honest, brutal type of comments, and because they're so kind. And so I wanted to make sure that I was even on track with writing something that people would read. And at the same time, I was going to the Get Lit Festival here in Spokane and listening from authors who had published, and taking writing workshops through the community colleges and through the Spokane library system. And so someone asked the Get Lit Festival. So that's something that happens every April. And it's usually organized by Eastern Washington University, and happens here in Spokane, and they bring in writers from around the country. So I was learning about publishing, learning about editing, all of that. And I kept hearing over and over how difficult it was for some of these authors who, some of them had, degrees in, in an MFA, and I'm thinking, well, what chance does my quirky little story have? And they were, they were being turned down. Some of them had taken, 10 or 12 times submitting a manuscript before being accepted and being published. And I was also hearing from writers who had done both, had gone through normal publishing channels and self-published. And the message I kept hearing was, unless you have already established yourself as an author and your name is recognizable, then it's better to self-publish, because you're going to be putting out a lot of money and doing all the work yourself anyway. So instead of hoping to get published and still have to do the work, it might be easier to go this route. And so I did. And I haven't been sorry that I have. I did the writing, like I said, I worked with friends who have been published as far as the substantive editing. I paid for a copy editor. I paid for the artwork for the covers. And I then paid for the formatting of the book and a printing of a certain number of books through Grey Dog Press here in Spokane. And that was so that I could work with local bookstores. I am a big believer in supporting local, and so Auntie's is my go-to bookstore. But then I did, because I also didn't want to have to be shipping books or responsible for collecting tax on books for friends or people in other states. I did put it on Amazon. I have switched over to Ingram Spark since that time, because I've learned that bookstores can order from Ingram Spark and libraries can as well. So I've done that piece in order to have books available outside of our local area. Does that answer questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a thing here. I put in the chat that I would be putting all of this stuff. You can go to either of the websites that I've been sending you links on, and there's a couple of pages on the Guild website that put in announcements and links for literary things of interest. And also the book club one, anytime it's of interest, I think they have a lot of authors who read and speak at Get Lit, and so I'll also have it on there. And in the meanwhile, if anyone wants to reach anyone else, especially if you're authors, and that person doesn't mind, I can send you each other's email addresses. If someone asks me if it's okay, then I will check with the other person and make sure, because otherwise all the stuff you get from me, you see that it looks like it's just coming to you. Well, it's got hundreds of people listed on there. So that you just can't see because it's blind copies. So, but in the meanwhile, Dan, you and Chris, you're both on Facebook, aren't you? I think.
Yeah.
You asked about social media, wanting to connect.
Yeah, I'm on Facebook and Instagram and pretty much everything else. And I like to connect with authors,
Mm-hmm.
especially local ones.
And Chris, you're on which ones?
Well, I am on Facebook and Instagram, but so here's one of those things that I need to do to take the next step is I need to and would like to create a separate author page on Facebook and Instagram just to keep personal life separate. And I guess in some ways I am a little bit like Rex in that I kind of like my little private space, and it's kind of scary just being on social media and saying yes to everyone if you don't know who they are. And so I feel like I need to have that more public page for as an author on social media.
People can connect on Facebook or Instagram. You don't have to be friends, and you don't. So it's only when you're asked to be a friend. I have a number of pages on Facebook. All of my public pages, you can go there, read the stuff, connect. So Chris, there is a way of doing it without having to go through a lot of hoops.
And I'm really happy to connect with other local authors. I just feel like I need to kind of know who you are, and that you're not some guy in Nigeria, trying to get my bank account.
When I get people asking to join any group, because they won't, if they just go to a page, it's a public page, they can go there. They won't, they can just follow you, and it doesn't matter. But when you get a message from someone, a follower, a friend, if you click on their name, it will take you to their page. In other words, don't click on the whole message or respond, but just click on the name of the person. You can go to their page and see that they're a writer. You see their background.
Okay.
That's what I do all the time, because I get those crazy people trying to.
And if there's, when you click on their name, if there's nothing there, they're ghosting you.
That it'll go to a page, they won't have any friends, they won't have any posts. It's just a page that
I say they're ghosting you because in my mind I translate that to be, oh, this is Herbie the stalker.
Yeah.
I get that a lot on Twitter.
Yeah, you'll get it anywhere,
And
but you can
you
always.
get too many bots on Twitter that.
And you can follow the, in other words, it may have a picture and a name and then their message and their whatever. Skip that and just go and try to see if you can't click on their name. It should take you to their account so you can.
I always click on their name because you can see how many tweets they've done in the last year.
Right.
You can tell if they're a complete lunatic by their posts, and if they do nothing but retweet just to get the clicks.
Yeah.
I get all these men from the military around the world writing to me. I have a beautiful smile. And
you
me to send them a friend. I know. It's like the same guys. I think they're trying to double date or something. But sometimes I'll comment and I'll say, what, are you a friend of my husband's or what? And then I don't hear from them again. But
I need that line, Linda.
Many they're Air Force, they're whatever, they're over in and I'm going, and I just ignore it. I just say ignore. It's pointless. They don't really think I have a beautiful smile. They just, I don't know what the heck they think they're doing. Collecting people, I guess.
Future suckers. Yeah.
Yeah. Brenda Clark, any comments?
Yes. Well, I read the first book, so I'm looking forward to this one because I thought Rex Begonia was pretty fun.
Oh, good.
So,
Cool.
May I put my Instagram address on here on the chat?
Sure, as long as you don't mind everybody and their uncle out there seeing it. I don't think they put this part up on the screen, but I'm not sure.
We're going to contact you, Daniel, and tell you you've got a pretty smile.
yeah.
Nice. And that you are a Nigerian prince. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'll be the king next week because we're killing my father. But meanwhile,
Yes.
Yeah.
That is the good thing about your website. You post everybody's websites.
yeah, I have been putting people, and I'm happy to put Instagram links, anything you want. on the INWG-guild.com. That's the link for the authors.
You haven't let everybody know that I'm trying to give away free audiobooks just to get a review.
No, I just,
Well, I will check out some of these local author websites, and I promise I will get an author site up and going right now. I'm willing to be friends on Facebook or Instagram. You'll mostly see lots of plant pictures.
well, and if you get any strange requests, go ahead and email me, Chris, and say, is this person, do you know this writer? Is this for real? And I can let you know.
Okay.
There's hundreds of them, so,
Can I
Jane,
ask a
I'm
question?
hoping to have Janet come and do one of these days.
Oh, yes.
Up to it. I'm working up to it.
Okay, she's been
Somebody,
coming in
somebody
and
had a
listen-
question.
Yeah.
Somebody else had a question.
who was that?
I did.
Oh.
Have you ever tried to do an audiobook?
Well, I have thought about that because I've heard statistics recently about how audiobooks have really shot up in popularity since the pandemic. Here's my problem. Puns and wordplay don't work as well.
Yeah.
With an audiobook. It's funnier to see the name Phil O'Dendron
Yeah.
than it is to hear it.
Mhm.
So that type of thing. So it is quite expensive to do. So I just don't know that it would work for what I'm doing right now. How about yourself? Do you have experience with it?
No, I was just kind of checking around to see how to do that.
Sounds
Well-
like maybe her.
You really do need a good narrator. A good narrator will make the whole thing. If you have a narrator that can make the pun work or get the good voices. I'm lucky as my daughter is a radio DJ and has been for decades. And so she narrated mine and she does production and everything. So basically I got it for free.
Yeah.
I just have to give her half the royalties. But
Well,
there-
if she did it, then how did it get produced into the audiobook?
Oh, she did it.
She did that all.
If you go into like ACX, I don't know how the others do it, but ACX, you can actually go into ACX, which is a subdivision of Amazon, and you can actually audition people and listen to little samples of their recordings and stuff, and you actually pay the narrator, but you can profit share with the production people. Unless it's the same person, they can profit share the whole thing. But it's expensive. Like, I think at a minimum, it's like $400 a finished hour for the book. And at a minimum, and they go up from there.
Okay.
So mine was like, what, 11 hours, the first, the finished book. So it had been like $4,000
Yeah.
Okay.
at a minimum.
Yeah, anytime you engage the assistance of a professional, not somebody that just will maybe. Oh, that brings up an interesting thing I was going to mention. I'll mention it here, but I'll mention it at the next guild meeting too. Is there are, I'm told by the industry that there are thousands of people coming out of the woodwork claiming to be agents. Anybody can be an agent. You just promote yourself and say, there is no policing of that industry.
Wow.
There's no licensing required or anything. So watch yourself, because the real agents are picky. They don't go slopping around saying, oh, you got a book? Hey, I'd like to represent you. You know, that's not how it's done. So be sure you know what you're doing. There is an organization that is full of attorneys and people, the Authors Guild, and they give me, I go to tons of their things. They're free workshops or free Zoom events where they have different people giving, covering different topics. And this one I just went to recently. was manuscript to final book or something like that. He was talking about the process, and he mentioned in there about this thing with the agents. Just don't assume because they're in a magazine or they're in anything and they claim to be an agent. What you do is, and again, this is important that people be readers. You look at books in your genre, and inside the book, somewhere usually on the back or inside, it will tell you. It will say, thanks to my agent, so-and-so. And it will tell you, and this same thing for a lot of people, editors, they'll give you their names in there, they'll thank them. Track those people down.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Real people that have put out that book you're reading. And don't jump for that stuff.
If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Probably is, exactly, yeah. Well, kids, unless you have any more questions for Chris or comments, we're.
Thank you for doing your book for us, Chris.
Yes, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
I
Thanks.
giggled. It offered me so many giggles, and I really appreciate that.
That means a lot from my fellow mystery readers.
Okay,
Thank you.
Okay.
well, it was wonderful. You made our second edition of the local authors book group very successful, Chris. I appreciate all your efforts on our part. And thanks to everyone who came and made it just delightful. And
Thank you.
you have any questions or things you think of after the fact, go ahead and email me. You've got it. Every message you get from me has that same thing. I sent it out to people, writers. I sent it out through Linda the Writer, and for book clubs, I sent it out through Auntie's Books. So you've got two different things to choose from, and get in touch. Love you. Love you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for what
Bye.
you do.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye, Linda.
Bye-bye. Ta-ta.